Welcome to the Business Education Insights. My name is Todd Hutchison and today I'm interviewing Ron Gibson from Go Networking, Australia's leading professional expert in business relationships, networking and word-of-mouth referrals. We all know that each of us prefer to do business with people we know, like and trust. Networking is the key to being known and effective in building productive relationships. Welcome Mr. Ron Gibson to Business Education Insights.
Nice to be with you, Todd.
Ron, you started your career as an accountant and came across the concept of networking quite by accident. Can you tell us exactly what happened?
There were two things that were happening simultaneously during the 1980s before I got the idea for my business. Those two things were this. I had a boss that taught me a really important principle in business. Don't try to sell, cause them to want to buy from you. That was his message to me. And in a nutshell, that meant we had to be very good at building relationships and building value into our relationships and being helpful and generous to the point where our customers, our clients, trusted us enough to give us their business at the price we were asking. And the other thing that was going on at the same time was that some of my pals from the accounting profession were saying to me, Ron, we've got to go out there and get our business. How do you do that? And I was a bit flippant at the time and I said, well, get off your tails and go and talk to people. But they said, what do you say? What do you do? What do you ask? And enough of that was going on for me to think there's an opportunity here to teach people how to have a business conversation that led to business.
So when we're talking about in context setting, leading to a conversation, the term networking, what does it actually mean?
Look, I think too many consultants have complicated the word. Really, it's all about making friends and hanging on to them and being friendly. Simple as that.
Ron, we talked about relationships, but how do you actually go about building the relationship?
It's simple, but it's hard at the same time, Todd. And I guess it starts with finding something in common with the person you've just met. Without that commonality, people in common, things in common, histories in common, objectives, goals in common, without finding that commonality, very hard to build a rapport upon which you can build a relationship. That's the first thing. Then comes asking good questions, because by asking great questions, in fact, you asked earlier on, what are some of the good things that people do in networking environments, be that at an event or at a follow-up subsequent coffee meeting or wherever else it might be. People who understand this networking thing and do it well ask great questions. So they learn enough about the person they're meeting to be able to figure out how to build a relationship. Because what you tell me as a result of the questions I ask give me all sorts of clues and hints on how I can build a relationship with you, Todd. To build that relationship means I've got to spend time with you. I've got to see you again. I've got to email you again. I've got to call you again. I've got to buy you a beer. I've got to have lunch with you. We've got to catch up on a regular basis. And I've often said somewhere between 5 and 8 conversations, be that over the phone or face-to-face or Skype, but personal conversations, face-to-face is always the best. Sometimes less than 7, sometimes more, sometimes never. But where most people go wrong is they give up too soon. The relationship doesn't yield or blossom what they want from it, so they give up. They give up too soon. So I say invest in the relationship over the longer term, and the best way to build a relationship, Todd, is to help someone. Help them with something that is relevant, pertinent and useful to them with no strings attached.
You've always talked about adding value before getting value. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. At a networking function, everybody is in the room to better themselves or their business or better their circumstances. Everybody in the room is. So my advice to the people I coach and I train and I give presentations to is, if you don't go to networking events wanting to help other people better their circumstances, don't go, because you won't enjoy it and you'll get no value out of it. You've got to give.
And what about doing things before you go to the event? Like you might ask for the list of attendees, and how do I go about getting onto the table, for example, of the person I want to meet?
Well, sometimes you can't get the list, but if you do want the list, it means you've got to have a relationship, a genuine relationship that takes time to build with the organisers. And in fact, I was at an event last Wednesday evening and I didn't have to ask for the invitation list or the attendee list. They rang me and said, would I like to have it? So my advice is build the relationship first before you ask for anything too soon. Don't ask for too much too soon. Don't ask for something too big too early. Build the relationship and you'll get the attendee list. In fact, they'll give it to you. Get there nice and early. Have a think about what you're going to say when people say to you, so what do you do? You better have an answer to that question because you only get one crack at it and you don't want to mess it up. Get there nice and early, I say, because as you get there nice and early, you're there amongst the organisers and the key players, the sponsors, the speakers, the people that know everybody else in the room, the heavy hitters, if you like, and you get a chance to build a bit of a rapport or start a relationship with those people. And the good thing is, you don't have to do any butting into conversations. As the people are trickling through the door, they have to do the butting in. They're going to start the conversations. They're going to join you in conversation. So my advice is get there early and stay late. And you'll have the best conversations you've ever had.
What about when I'm wanting to meet someone particular at the event? What's the best way to approach them?
Get yourself introduced. I'm not frightened. You know me, Todd. I'm happy to walk up to anybody and introduce myself. But that's not the smartest way. The smartest way for me to meet you is for someone you know and trust to introduce me to you. So I ask people to introduce me to the people they know. And that's always the best way, I think, to meet other people.
What's the most common mistakes people make with networking?
They confuse it with selling, or they confuse it with socialising. Socialising's fun, Todd, but it won't cut it in terms of building opportunities for your business, because socialising is just about hanging out with your mates, having small talk, catching up, and that doesn't lead to anything substantial, anything meaningful that you can follow up as in terms of a next step. So socialising doesn't cut it. Neither does selling, especially try to sell to someone you've just met. And as my old boss used to say to me, Ron, don't try to sell people because they don't want to buy. They'll want to buy when they're ready to buy. So the key is to create an atmosphere where they want to buy.
Ron, can you tell me the difference between socialising and networking?
Sure, Todd. There's a very distinct difference, and it's important that people understand the difference if they want networking to work for them. So here we go. If there's no talk about how we can help each other, Todd, if there's no agreement for us to go off and do something together, or me for you or you for me, if you aren't sharing information with me that I can use in my life, in my business, if I'm not sharing information with you that you can use in your life and in your business, if there's no follow-up for us to carry the conversation to the next level or agree to catch up again to continue chewing the fat and to build a relationship, you've been socialising. You haven't been networking at all.
Ron, what's the difference then when someone's networking compared to selling?
There's a huge difference, and it's so obvious. If I'm meeting you for the first time and I'm shoving a card in your face, apropos of nothing, before we've even had a conversation, I'm in sales mode. If I'm going to a networking function or a follow-up coffee meeting and I'm just hell-bent on getting you across the line as a client or customer, as opposed to building a friendship with you, an advocacy, a relationship, then I'm in sales mode. If I'm forever, every time I'm meeting people, including you and others, just bringing up my business all the time, every opportunity, elevator pitching you about my products and services, I'm in selling mode. I'm not in networking and relationship building mode. And worse, if I follow up after meeting you for the first time with a please find attached my brochure, here's a special offer on my products and services for this month. If you don't get early, you're going to miss out. If that's all I'm doing, then I'm in sales mode. And I'm not building relationships, I'm not building advocacy, and I sure aren't building word of mouth and referrals for my business.
When can one appropriately follow up with some sales-related business activity?
Oftentimes, the client or the prospect will say, Ron, I think we probably need to hire you. Ron, I think we need to look at doing some business with you. Can you send us some details? Can you send us some information? Have you got a website? Have you got a flyer or a brochure about your business? Can you send us the details? If you manage the conversation right, Todd, the potential customer, the person that's going to become your customer tomorrow, they'll ask you to give them the sales pitch. And that's the key to mastering a business conversation or a networking conversation.
And so Ron, why is networking so critical to business and your own career progression?
Well, from a business context, the vast majority of business is done through personal connections. Networks, referrals, word of mouth, endorsements, testimonies from other people. And if you don't have a network, or you don't know how to build a network of people out there saying great things about you behind your back and about your business, then you can't possibly succeed in business. It's not possible. And from a career point of view, all the top jobs, all the high-paying jobs in every profession, in every industry, are filled through personal connections. So you've got to have a network. Otherwise, you don't get the top jobs, or you're fighting hard to get them, and often you come in second place.
Absolutely. And what do people do really well or poorly at networking events?
Well, let's start with the poorly thing. The biggest mistake people make, I believe, is they spend far too much time talking to people they already know, and not nearly enough time starting conversations and having conversations with people they have just met. And the problem with that is that by talking to the people you know all the time, you just finish up having small talk. Small talk leads to no business or small business. When you're talking to people that you haven't met before, oftentimes it's a bigger conversation, a more meaningful one, which leads to bigger business or bigger business opportunities.
See, some people think the aim of networking is about collecting business cards.
Well, it's not. You might say that's the start of the process, but the real networking happens after you meet someone, Todd. Exchanging a business card is one thing. Going back to your office and having an email exchange of nice to meet you and that kind of thing, and then inviting each other to link up on LinkedIn, that's another step that people take. But after that, nothing. They don't even have a conversation. And they wonder why this networking thing doesn't work for them. You've got to build the relationship beyond the first encounter.
Is that the difference between networking and strategic networking?
Look, I think networking is really just about building relationships, whether you're strategic about it or not so strategic about it. I'm friendly to everybody, and I don't qualify anyone. And no one really knows where their next piece of business or the next referral is going to come from. What do they say? You never know. You never know who's going to give you that piece of business, where it's going to come from, when it's going to come. So I don't think you can be too strategic about your networking. I just think you need to build relationships with people who are well connected, well regarded, and who are out there shaking hands and having conversations with a client base that you'd like to tap into. But the key here, Todd, is that it's got to be a two-way street. I just can't milk you for your contacts and your leads and your referrals and opportunities coming from you. I've got to give back. In fact, I've got to give first. And I've got to give more than I asked for. And what I've found is that the more I give, the more I get.
And people often struggle with explaining what their business does, often called the elevator speech. Why is it so hard?
They don't put enough thought into it, Todd. They don't describe their business in conversational terms. You might think of it as a piece of algebra. X plus Y equals Z, or Z, where X is what you do, Y is who you do it for, and Z, or Z, is the outcomes you create for the people that you do the business for, or do the work for. Another way to describe what you do is to say something along the lines, Todd, people come to me, or businesses come to me when they want. And then you finish the statement. But the key is, in that little statement, in that little elevator pitch as you described it, is you say three things. What you do, who you do it for, and the results and the outcomes you create for your clients and customers. The trick is to get all that into a short statement, in a nutshell if you like, so that it's memorable and succinct and people walk away knowing a fair idea about what you do.
I think that's a major issue, isn't it? Because I've often seen people are well networked, they feel like they're well networked, they know a lot of people, but not a lot of people know what they actually do.
No, they don't. And if they don't know what they do, how can they describe what they do? And if they can't describe what they do, how can people remember what they do? And if they can't remember what they do, how can they tell their friends about what you do? In which case, you're not getting any referrals, you're not getting word of mouth, the phone isn't ringing, the business isn't coming after you.
Absolutely.
Which means you're stuck with cold calling and all the other forms of trying to build a business, which are nowhere near as effective as networking is when it's done right.
What are the key steps for someone to build their business or career through networking?
Various things, Todd, not in any particular order, but they need to be more actively involved in their local business community. That means belonging to groups, belonging to association, networks, chambers of commerce. You've got to get involved with these things. Most business relationships initiate or begin in the social zone. That is before 9 and after 5. And that's when the networking events are on. And if you're not there, I put it to you that you're missing 40% of the potential growth of your business. So you've got to be there. The other thing is, you've got to have a bit of a strategy in terms of who you want to be talking to after you meet these people. I call it a conversation list. You need to have a conversation list so that you know who you need to be talking to on a regular basis, who you need to be having a cup of coffee with, taking out for breakfast, taking out for lunch, having a beer with after work, so that you're in regular touch with these people, building the relationship, creating value for them by means of referrals and introductions and pieces of information that can help them grow their business and be successful in life and in their business, feeding the relationships. So that means staying in touch with people on a regular basis, at least every 2 or 3 months at the minimum.
What about after meeting them? How soon should you follow up?
I think straight away. The sooner the better. In fact, last night I met some interesting people at a function, and as I was walking to my car, I was pulling my mobile phone out so that when I sat in my motor car, before I turned the ignition on, I sent off 2 text messages to 2 people who I'd met just 10 or 15 minutes priorhand, saying it was great to meet them, I enjoyed their company, and I'll be in touch.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And as a well-experienced coach, what is the number one hurdle people have in getting started in networking?
Having a plan and implementing the plan and sticking to the plan. They find it difficult to integrate networking habits, events, following up, cups of coffee, lunches, phone calls, personal emails going. They find it difficult to integrate those things into their busy working schedules. So it becomes random and ad hoc. And the networking results just don't come. So you've got to have a plan. Todd, you know that in your business.
Absolutely.
And you've got to be able to implement the plan consistently well.
If you are to refer someone, there's a potential risk that that referral may not work. How do you manage that risk?
Not all referrals work. But what I like to do, Todd, if I'm going to refer you to someone, first of all, I will ask you, do you want to meet person A? And I'll speak to person A. I'll say, person A, do you want to meet person B, which is you, Todd? So I will do a little bit of due diligence to see whether the referral is a good fit for the 2 parties involved. And what I usually like to do is personally introduce you and the other person face to face with me there over a cup of coffee.
Very good idea.
Yeah.
What would you suggest is the very next step for the viewer to implement your insights from today?
Make a commitment to building your networking skills. As I said right at the start, Todd, if you don't have a network, if our listeners don't have a network, if they don't know how to build a network, they can't possibly achieve full success in life. Their success, if anything, will be mediocre, if that. So they've got to make a commitment to improving their skills as a networker. And there's no such thing as a natural networker. Natural networkers do not exist. So you've got to learn the skill. And understand there's a big difference between networking and socializing, and a big difference between networking and selling. And this is where most people go wrong. They tend to oscillate either between socializing or selling and not networking at all, and then say, this networking thing doesn't work.
Excellent. Mr. Ron Gibson from Go Networking, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for being in the studio.
Nice to be with you, Todd.